Hey everybody, welcome back to this week's episode of the Wealthy Legacy Journey. I'm Kendall, your host. Super excited to have you guys here with me today. And we're going to be talking about a really kind of cool topic that's been on my heart this week that, I feel like I've been kind of getting some clarity and revelation in and stuff like that. And to sum it up in one sentence, that really is success doesn't come from being busy. It comes from being productive. And I know for me, there's a lot of times in my life that I can look back on and I can say, like, wow, like in that moment or in that season, I was really busy, but I wasn't productive. And then there's times where like I was very busy and productive at the same time, and that's wonderful. And there's other moments where I was being very productive, but I wasn't necessarily busy all the time. And to define the distinction between those three is crucial. In Dave Ramsey's EntreLeadership book, he kind of puts it a little bit differently, and I really liked how he structured it. And he kind of put basically there's like four categories of tasks. So he starts off with important and urgent. Then the second category is important but not urgent. And I can't think of an example of either one of those, like right off the top of my head, that he mentioned. The next one I can think of an example of, it was not important but urgent, and he talked about answering phone calls like around the house and how those had to be answered before the phone would stop ringing. It had to be answered in a short amount of time, but they might not be important phone calls. And then his last category was not important and not urgent. And one of the tasks I think he mentioned is like once his company got bigger and successful, sweep it for him to stop and sweep the floors, like that wasn't really a productive use of his time. And so, anyways, those four, categories being really interesting. Before I dive though too deep into today's episode, I want to really kind of push my legacy forward. And in that, there's been a lot of stuff going on right now with Israel and the Hamas and what's going on there. And so, we've been praying, my family's been praying for Israel and what's going on over there. And just for there to be peace in that region, absolutely would be amazing. But, for me, just putting out there to the world, like the hashtag I just heard about it, but I would stand with the Jews. And that's a part of my legacy. And my pastor, Pastor Gary, even talks about how, like us as Christians, we owe a deep gratitude to the Jews for being able to have our faith because Jesus was a Jew. And so if it wasn't the lineage of the Jews bringing Jesus, like I wouldn't have the freedom that I have. And that's just a wonderful gift that I get to receive as part of every one of my days. And so I think a big part of building our legacy is like no matter what you believe or what kind of is your viewpoint in life, like you have to be bold about it. You have to believe in it. You have to be able to put it out there and be confident. And so that's just one area that I'm really confident in. So I wanted to share that for anybody listening that, if there's a Jew listening to this, like I'm with you and I'm for you and I'm praying for you and your people. And I'm grateful for, what's come from the Jewish people so that I might have eternal life myself. But anyways, with that said, I want to get back to the topic today of productive and busy. And it was interesting because this past week, I was texting back and forth with a coworker, and I'm going to look over here at my phone because I just want to remember my notes. But, I said as we were texting back and forth, there was this lead that came through and basically it was like, hey, if you can't go walk this weekend, like let me know, I'll go walk it. And it ended up, I don't even think it ended up actually looking like it was going to be a deal. But I texted him back and I was like, hey, like why basically like why do we need to walk it this weekend? Like I've never seen a really great deal, fall apart. Like if he's like, I'm gonna sign with somebody this weekend, and so if it isn't you, like it's somebody else, but I'm going to sign this weekend, then absolutely, like that's important and it's urgent, right? But a lot of times, like yes, the contracts are important and they're somewhat urgent. You don't want to let them sit there forever, but most people understand like, hey, you've got a family, I've got a family. Let's, if this is like on a Friday, let's work out the paperwork. I'll see you on Monday if that's, something that we want to move forward on. So anyways, but as we were texting, one of my texts to him as of encouragement was I said, I just always remember the kiddos are only young once. And I forgot that for a while. And when I got into the game, I forgot that. And I can hardly remember when Liliana was a baby. And those are some painful years for me in my own remembering back is I got so busy that I really left my family behind for a while. Like I was home, but I wasn't engaged. And there was a lot of days where I was working 16, 17-hour days and really just putting my family on the back burner, reaching for this goal But I was making that a higher priority than them. And that's a disappointing thing, but something I have to admit, and it's something that I'm working to overcome. So after a few years, I realized that it's not worth missing a lifetime for a deal. And most reasonable sellers understand that. And something I just want to encourage you guys with, and I want to encourage myself with, something I have to remind myself often, is that it's not worth trading a lifetime for $1. It just isn't. There's no amount of money that it's worth giving up these precious years of your life that you absolutely cannot get back for a couple bucks, and that's where I think in life we really have to dial in, even for me and my schedule. Like Dave Ramsey talks about, a financial budget is telling your money where to go so you don't sit back and wonder where it went. Same for a time budget. Your time budget is a budget of you telling yourself where your time is going to go so you don't sit back and wonder where it went. Where did those years go? Where did all that time go? Like, you have to specifically plan your time. That's also the importance to be able to categorize tasks. And I've been working to do this in my own life, and I don't like necessarily write it down on a piece of paper. Different people organize differently. When I look at different tasks, I really sit back. If I need to, if I'm in a time where it's like, hey, this is going to overlap into a part of the time that it shouldn't. For example, the weekends, or for my family, if I have a work task that might bleed over into the weekend, I really have to ask myself, is this important and urgent? Or is this maybe just important, but not urgent? Or maybe there's a work call that comes in. It's like, hey, I could just call them back after I put the kids to bed. Like, hey, it seems urgent, but it's really not important that I get to this right this minute. I can call them back in an hour. I can text back in an hour, whatever. And then there's also those things in life that are not important. They're not urgent. We just let them take up a bunch of our time. And unfortunately, I think a lot of us fill our time with things that aren't important or urgent. And we end up devoting a ton of our time there and just sucking all of our time away. For example, watching TV, and this is going to be a hard one. For Libby and I, we let ourselves watch TV after the kids go to bed. There's about an hour and a half window on Friday night and Saturday night. And we're not even always home both of those nights. And just because we are home doesn't mean that we watch TV both of those nights. But even last night, being a Tuesday night, I got in bed, and so we don't watch TV. We don't have social media. And so I just sat there, and it was like 7:15. And so I kind of just sat there for a couple minutes and just like thinking on the day and really just kind of clearing my mind. And then I was just kind of relaxed sitting there, and I was like, okay, I want to dig into Good to Great. And I got back into the book for a little bit, and I read a whole chapter of that, and I'm getting through Good to Great slowly but surely. Libby and I are also reading a really cool parenting book at the same time. So I don't usually like read for 2 hours straight with all of my free time. I'll kind of read one or read the other. But I'm about halfway through Good to Great now, and there's a really good concept that I learned yesterday that I'm actually going to share with you guys here in just a minute. But another thing that I did this week was we went over to my parents. They were going to watch some of our kiddos. They're going to spend the night over there, and I was talking with my dad, who helped me build the bot, and he was like, hey, there's this thing that I want to show you on TradingView. Like, come check it out right quick. And I really had to say, like, hey, no, this is my weekend. I don't want to burn myself out. And I also want my family to feel like a priority. Like, I can sit here and chit chat with you about it on the couch while, we just have a minute to chit chat, but I don't want to get sucked away to the computer for 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. We don't even know where all the time's gone because I did something that was kind of important, but not super important. It really wasn't urgent, and I let it take up my time. So that might be like important, not urgent, or even worse, not important and not urgent. Whichever one you would categorize that in, for just kind of looking at stuff. But I could spend a ton of my time there, not focused on my kids, not focused on my wife, and not really living out my mission statement, which a part of my mission statement is to make my family feel like a constant top priority. And so in that moment, I had to figure out, how do I make my family feel like a constant top priority? And does going to the computer align more with my mission statement, or does staying here and being engaged with the family right now align more with my mission statement? Just for that moment, that wasn't even work. And staying there with my family align more with my mission statement. So the mission statement is so powerful. Like, if you don't have a money budget and a time budget and a life mission statement, which is kind of like a life budget, I guess, where you're going to allocate your focus, your time and attention and your money, like, you're not going to be able to create something amazing. But if you can start to get a hold of that, if you create your mission statement, you live by it. If you can create a time budget, you can create a money budget, and then you live by it, and you are consistent with it, you will see results. it was interesting though, just kind of some of the perspective that I had, because this weekend when we dropped the kids off, we dropped off the van, our minivan, and so we brought back their truck with KB, and so basically on Sunday morning we could either drive their truck to church, which is gas guzzler, or we could drive the car, my little car. And so we looked at our money budget, and it was like, well, that's going to take a bunch of gas to drive the truck, and we don't really need to. So we switched the car seat over to the little car. And it was funny because it was just me and Libby and KB in the car because they had the girls. And I was sitting there, and I reached my arm over, and Libby was sitting right there next to me. And we're always in this tiny car. Like I could have easily reached back and touched KB because it's just a little Ford Fiesta. And I was like, man, like I feel so blessed to be so close to my wife, even though I loved my truck that I had before. There was such a distance there. And so it was like looking at the blessings of what do I have in this moment. And it was just interesting. Like I just thought in that moment, like I kind of wish that I had slowed down and enjoyed the moment of like back then, having like a Scion, TA, or I think it was, or something like that. Anyways, and then we had a Honda Civic. We actually had two Honda Civics. We had one Honda Civic that was from like the early 90s. We called her Bluebell. And that one didn't really have any AC. So having the air conditioning was great. But then we had another, Civic, and it actually didn't have a back door. So like getting the car seat in there was weird because you had to like push the seat forward and then wiggle the car seat back there. And it was like a used Honda Civic that we had actually gotten blessed with for free at a time where I had spent 6 months on a flip, and we didn't think we were going to make any money on that deal. And we ended up making just a couple $1,000s, but obviously a couple thousand after working on something for months and months was still painful. And we were like almost at the end of our rope at that point, and the Lord provided, and it was a huge blessing. But anyways, I just think about like I kind of wish I had slowed down to smell the roses in some of those moments instead of just always pushing to get ahead, always pushing to get ahead, always pushing to get ahead, not being grateful for where I'm currently at. And but I realized, instead of just looking back and saying woulda, coulda, shoulda, I wish I woulda, I wish I could, or I should have done. Instead of saying those, I'm going to say, here's what I'm going to do now to start living it out and just soaking up that moment. Like, man, I'm so grateful that I have this car because of X, Y, and Z. One day, will I probably get another bigger truck again? Probably. Whenever I'm ready and I can afford it and I can buy it cash, and it's not, like looking at the Robert Kiyosaki sticker, I don't want to be the middle class where I'm basically taking my salary and putting it into liabilities that are just expenses on my income statement. But on my income statement, I really actually want to have income that purchases assets, and those assets create more income, and the income purchases more assets, and this goes round and round. So I have plenty of assets and plenty of income, and then I use the income from the reoccurring assets to then buy some liabilities, and I have less expenses than I have assets and income. So that's kind of the rich dad, poor dad way. And so that's what I'm learning right now. And that's why I love the cash flow board game. It's just kind of reminding me of like the importance of doing that, and that, just being consistent with that. But anyways, it was interesting. And this week I actually had a deal in Joshua that didn't go the way that I expected. And I've kind of been a little bit of slump on acquisitions, just really haven't had any deals to connect on. But I just kind of was able to walk away from the Joshua deal just going, hey, I'm still blessed. I'm still blessed because of, and I just started listing things off. And even this morning, like last night, KB was sick. And he's 7-8 months old. So if any of you ever had a baby, that a 7 to 8 month old like sick is in your bed and awake. And if they're awake, fussing, you're kind of awake, dealing with them. And, praise the Lord, Libby did most of the stuff with him through the night. And I got up and cooked breakfast for everybody this morning. But I woke up and actually I was texting back and forth with Nathan about some stuff, and somehow it came up that KB was sick, and but it was like in that moment I just felt like a pressing from Lord, but like to just say like, but praise the Lord, like I have a son in my life that is here to be sick. Like I'm grateful for my son. Like even though last night was a tough night, instead of waking up and going like, oh my gosh, like I hate my life. Like, oh, it was, I couldn't sleep last night and I'm just grumpy and everything. Waking up and going, wow, I'm blessed to get to wake up to another day. And I'm blessed that I have a son who was there. And sometimes it's just telling your mind, like, this is, telling your mind, telling your soul, just like David did in the Psalms of like, we're going to get on board with the way that God tells us to live. for the gratefulness and the gratitude and the excitement for life and the excitement for God's plan and the excitement for what God's doing. It doesn't always feel good, but you have to get yourself there, right? And yeah, and so kind of another thing with that consistency that, I thought was interesting is this week when Libby and I were reading our parenting book, one of the first points that it talked about in chapter 1, it's called like something like God-driven discipline or something like that. It's by Clay Clarkson. Anyways, I'm not going to do like a book report on it or anything because it doesn't really have to do with the wealthy legacy journey. But this portion was interesting. It just talked about how deep relationships with your children is a key to consistency. It doesn't mean like, hands off, do whatever you want. But also you don't want to be like hands-on, helicopter deep enforcing, build a relationship. That doesn't mean that, hey, we're buddies, you can treat me however you want. Like, no, there's still like a level of respect. Just like, we have a fear of the Lord, but a relationship with God. But there is, consistency. And I sat back and I was like, man, like so many people over time have just been like, man, like you're killing it as a dad, you're killing it as a husband. And while they might be struggling in those aspects, some of the business people that I know, but yet like I feel like I'm struggling to connect in business in some of the ways. I'm like, man, but you're killing it in business. Like, praise the Lord, He's shown me how to do this well with my family. What am I missing? And really when he was talking about the consistency of the relationships and stuff like that, I realized like, wow, in my relationship with Libby and our relationship with my kids, like I've been fairly consistent. And kind of Libby and I have we basically have had this, I don't know, mantra, or not really a mantra, it's just kind of the way we've handled situation is really we've been consistent until there's been a need to pivot. But I realized that in my business I've kind of been flip-flop of that. I realized like on hindsight, looking in reflection in the rear view mirror, that in business I've kind of taken the opposite approach where I've just continued to pivot until I'm forced to be consistent. So what I mean by that is like, I'll try this and I'll try this and I'll try this and I'll try this and I make some money here and I make some money there. It's like, okay, good. But I'm just having fun, like trying stuff until I get to a point where I'm so far at the bottom, like right now. And, there's been other points where I have to, build up the war chest again. And then I get consistent and I have a job. It's like, okay, I'm just going to be consistent. I'm going to do the grind. I'm going to get better. And then I'm going to build up this surplus. And then it's like when I have money again, now I'm just going to go do this and do that and do this and do that. And I'm going to start pivoting again instead of just forcing myself to be consistent. And one of the things that helps me to be consistent is definitely Libby. And I was actually talking with Kane this week about how I really need a right-hand man in my life, in business that's kind of more of the stable personality type where it's like, hey, they want to help me also build something great. But whenever I come to the table and I'm like, hey, we should try this, I need somebody that's like, hey, we really should focus in and just keep doing really well what we're doing. So like instead of doing this and then, hey, let's go try this, it's like I need somebody who's going to hold me accountable in my day in and day out business to say like, hey, instead of trying to go do something else, let's see what else can we do and what we're already doing to make what we're doing even better. And in the Good to Great book, like one really cool example that he talked about a lot in chapter 5 of Jim Collins is Walgreens, and about how Walgreens versus I think Eckerd was the other drugstore at the time, and how Walgreens really just consolidated their business model and they just focused everything in on making the best convenient drugstores as possible. And they really defined what does it mean to be a convenient drugstore. It wasn't all just about expanding to have as many drugstores as possible. It was about, for example, like you'll notice that Walgreens is on the corner. The reasons that Walgreens is on the corner is because their focus was on being the most convenient drugstore. And so they said, well, a corner lot people can get to from 2 different directions. That's more convenient than a single entry exit point. So that was a part of their plan. Another thing was they had, I think it said in San Francisco at one point, they had 9 stores within a 1-mile radius. So people didn't have to walk more than 4 blocks. And that for them was a way to be the most, just accessible and convenient drugstore and convenience store as possible. They want to be a very convenient store. And they also turned their model from how to be as profitable per store to be, as profitable as possible per customer, really focusing on the customer first, not the store first. And anyways, so like this shift in their business, like really helped them to excel. But instead of, just going like, hey, we're going to just grow every way we can, and like, hey, we're going to be like good at the drugstore thing. And, maybe we're going to try to be good at, like restaurants as well. And like anything where people walk in to get a service, like we're going to be in that business and we're going to try to just dominate all of them. They said, no, we're going to focus specifically on convenient drugstores, and we're going to be the absolute best at this as possible. Another example was Wells Fargo. And he talked about how, I think it was Citigroup was like this, international bank. And Wells Fargo was trying to compete with them like at an international level. I can't remember exactly what the other name of the other bank was, but it was Wells Fargo that was trying to compete with them. Anyways, they refocused and dialed back in. They realized like, hey, we can't be the best at that. Like we can be consistent and the best though at being like a bank that runs like a business instead of like an old school traditional bank in the Western United States. Like they really, it wasn't even just the United States, it was the Western United States. Like they really dialed in where they were going to be the best, how they were going to be the best. And it was just a really cool principle. And so I see that in parenting, but I also see that in business, is we have to be consistent. And so there's this piece of the book here in chapter 5 of Good to Great by Jim Collins that I want to read to you guys, where he talks about this hedgehog versus fox principle. So bear with me. I'm going to read just a couple pages here. This is starting on page 90, chapter 5, the hedgehog concept. Are you a hedgehog or a fox? In his famous essay, The Hedgehog and the Fox, Isaiah Berlin divided the world into hedgehogs and foxes. Based upon an ancient Greek parable, the fox knows many things, but the hedgehog knows one big thing. The fox is a cunning creature, able to devise a myriad of complex strategies for sneak attacks upon the hedgehog. Day in and day out, the fox circles around the hedgehog's den, waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. Fast, sleek, beautiful, fleet of foot, and crafty, the fox looks like the sure winner. The hedgehog, on the other hand, is a dowdier creature, looking like a genetic mix-up between a porcupine and a small armadillo. He waddles along, going about his simple day, searching for lunch, taking care of his home. The fox waits in cunning silence at the juncture in the trail. The hedgehog, minding his own business, wanders right into the path of the fox. Aha, I've got you now, thinks the fox. He leaps out, bounding across the ground, lightning fast. The little hedgehog, sensing danger, looks up and thinks, here we go again. Will he ever learn? Rolling into a perfect little ball, the hedgehog becomes a sphere of sharp spikes, pointing outward in all directions. The fox, bounding towards his prey, sees the hedgehog defense and calls off the attack. Retreating back to the forest, the fox begins to calculate a new line of attack. Each day, some version of this battle between the hedgehog and the fox takes place, and despite the greater cunning of the fox, the hedgehog always wins. Berlin extrapolated from this little parable to divide people into two basic groups, foxes and hedgehogs. Foxes pursue many ends at the same time and see the world in all of its complexity. They are scattered or diffused, moving on many different levels, says Berlin, never integrating their thinking into one overall concept or unifying vision. Pause here. This is that unifying vision, overall concept for me. This really correlates into a mission statement. Knowing how you take this complex world of all these opportunities and ideas and put them into one singular vision. To continue on, hedgehogs, on the other hand, simplify a complex world into a single organizing idea, a basic principle or concept that unifies and guides everything. It doesn't matter how complex the world, a hedgehog reduces all challenges and dilemmas to simple, indeed almost simplistic hedgehog ideas. For a hedgehog, anything that does not somehow relate to the hedgehog idea holds no relevance. And I'll leave it there. A lot more great stuff in that beginning of the chapter. There's basically 3 questions to the hedgehog principle that I want to go through. But before I say that, I think Dave Ramsey, I'm going to paraphrase here, but in his book, EntreLeadership, I remember specifically, and it stuck out to me so well. He said one of the things that he attributed to his success of the mission statement wasn't just that the mission statement told them what to do and helped them to make decisions of what they should do, but it also gave them the out of bounds, telling them what they should not pursue, what they should not do. And I found that to be very profound and very helpful in realizing that, wow, that mission statement also tells me here's what I should not try to do. I need to really stick to what my goal is, what my plan is, and I just need to keep doing that and doing that and doing that with consistency over time. And in the book, Jim Collins even talks about how Walgreens versus Eckerd, they were about the same size company. Well, Eckerd went on this huge buying spree and just ended up, basically they just thought bigger is better, and they started acquiring. They bought up all sorts of stuff. At one point, they even got into they bought I think it was funniest home videos or something like that. Anyways, they got into like television stuff, even though they were originally like a drugstore, because they thought that was the way of the future. And so they just kept expanding, until eventually they ended up declining and got bought out. I think it was in 1997. Whereas Walgreens shot through the roof. Let's see if I can. So that's Walgreens. There's a really cool chart in here. Let's see if I can find it. If you're watching, I think you'll find this really interesting if your brain thinks like mine. Fannie Mae. Oh, I know he had it in here somewhere. Well, anyways, here's a chart of Walgreens in this time. And you can see, so this dates back to 1975. And you see how a few years after this, deep focus change, they just took off like a rocket. This next one down is Intel, GE, General Electric, Coca-Cola, Merck, and the general market. It's really interesting because you can see how Walgreens went from a relatively okay company to being a wild success story. And geez, there was this quote now that I feel like I should look. It was oh man, where was it? He basically said that if you're well, I'm just gonna have to kind of paraphrase it because I don't know exactly. Oh, here. So the Fannie Mae versus Great Western case highlights an essential point. Growth is not a hedgehog concept. Rather, if you have the right hedgehog concept, think of this as like your focus, your mission statement, your guided direction, right? And make decisions relentlessly consistent with it, you will create such momentum that your main problem will not be how to grow, but how not to grow too fast. Wow, that's so powerful. Like just consistently sticking with a vision, with a focus, with what you're doing, what direction you're going. And eventually you'll get that flywheel spinning so quickly that instead of you having to push it forward, you're almost having to keep up with the momentum that's already happening. And so the 3 hedgehog questions that he gave, number 1, what can you be the best in the world at? And this is on page 95, 96. And equally important, what you cannot be the best in the world at. Number 2, what drives your economic engine? And he goes into that a little bit more deeply there, so I'm not going to go into that. And number 3, what are you deeply passionate about? And those are the 3 questions, and he creates this 3 circles of the hedgehog concept. Here you can see that image on page 96 if you're watching on YouTube. But anyways, this book's been powerful. I've absolutely loved going through it. But that was really powerful for me just because, I really have been inconsistent. I've been trying to just have growth at every move. Like, man, I really want to flip houses, and I also, want to do rentals, and I want to do a fund, and I want to do the stocks, and I want to do this, and I want to do that, and I want to just basically be able to just dominate in all these areas. And I realized, like, if I try to do that, I'll be probably somewhere between like good subpar to failure, right? But if I can get focused on here's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to be the absolute best at doing that. We're just going to continue to grow and expand in that arena to be the best at that when my next opportunity comes along for growth, and just to keep growing there. And like he said, being relentlessly consistent. That's been my problem. That's really what I want to focus on. So I encourage you guys, whatever you're doing, be relentlessly consistent in what you're doing. Anyways, that's pretty much all I've got for this week. I want to remind you again that there is a link for all of the, there's a link to a Google Sheet that has all the links for like resources and stuff like that in the description. I'm sure at some point that'll change to be the website. But I want to keep it simple at first. So make sure you check in the description of the YouTube video or Spotify for links to the books and the resources. Make sure you, everybody always says this, so I feel like I should kind of say it. Like and subscribe if you want to. I'd love to have you along in the journey. Obviously, I'm posting a video every single week, or a podcast, and I'm bringing you guys along and what's happening, what I'm learning. Are things going well? Are they not going well? So this was a little bit better week mentally. Deal wise, it was about the same as last week, but mentally, I'm just going in this week with a lot more strength, which has been awesome. And so, anyways, I hope you guys have found this useful. I'd really just want to close by encouraging you guys to remember that success doesn't come necessarily from being busy. It comes from being productive. Like Dave Ramsey said, I think it was focus, intensity over time multiplied by the power of God equals success. I want to say it was something like that, or momentum, or whatever it was, something like that. But focus, intensity over time multiplied by God equals, I forget if it was success or momentum or something along those lines, but I think it might have been momentum. I think it was the momentum theorem, if I remember correctly. But I just really remember that. And so, he said focus, intensity over time multiplied by God. Jim Collins here is talking about the hedgehog concept of just doing that same thing well over and over. The fox has so many different ways to attack. The hedgehog has one defense. He rolls up into a ball. That's it. He does it every single time because it works, and it works good. He's relentlessly consistent with that defense mechanism. What do you think would happen if the hedgehog said, hey, let me try it like a possum does this time around and play dead? He's probably going to end up dead, right? What if I try to, bound away like the rabbits that I see and just try to run away from the fox and outrun him? He's probably going to end up dead. But if he stays relentlessly consistent to what he knows he can be the best in the world at, he might not be the fastest runner like the rabbit. He might not be the best at playing dead like the possum, but he can be relentlessly consistent. He can be the best at the world and at rolling up into a ball and being pokey. And you know what? That might not be the most exciting thing ever in the world. Just like some of the things that we might be able to be the best at might not be sound like it's the most amazing thing in the world ever. But if it's something that you can be passionate about, and it's something that you can be the best in the world at, and it's something that can drive an economic engine for success and growth and wealth, then you focus relentlessly consistent on that, and you'll have success. In that, though, don't forget to be relentlessly consistent with your family too, because they're a massive part of your legacy. So don't leave them behind. With that said, this has been another episode of the Wealthy Legacy Journey. Thank you so much for joining me here. And like always, here's to you and your own personal wealthy legacy journey. I'll see you guys next week.